Dear friends, my name is Siddiq. I teach microeconomics in the Department of Economics, University of Kerala. Um, Today I am going to talk about the third module, which is there in the second semester of BA Economics. The module's title is Social Interaction, Property and Power. In the first lecture, I will be very brief. I think I'll be talking about game theory, equilibrium in the invisible hand game, the prisoner's dilemma, social preference, and altruism. So these are the topics which I am going to cover today. And after this, the subsequent lectures may cover the other part of the problem. So what I feel today is to just begin with the game theory, and I hope all of you will enjoy this lecture in the time of pandemic. So welcome all to my lecture. Let me first talk about game theory and what is a game we mean. Normally games are all kinds of interactions, social interactions comes under the purview of games. Most of the games are formal games and as well as informal games. So in a nutshell, a description of a social interaction is specifically called a game. For example, football games, cricket, then chess, then you can have decision making by two different individuals and two different individuals socially or individually. That means independently or independently. So these are actually called different kinds of interaction, and that different kinds of interactions comes under the purview of the game. For example, in India, normally we can say where the driving is. For example, in India, you have to drive on the left. On the contrary, in the United States, they drive on the right. So, and in India, the driving seat is in the right, and in the United States or UK, driving seat is on the left. So these are actually rules which is lays how you have to interact, etc. So interaction is normally not necessarily being done by every individual themselves, but it is also being driven by different kinds of rules which is prevails or laid out by the administration. We largely call the rules of the game. So in a game, normally different types of players exist. So the player, defining the player is the most important thing. A player is nothing but a person who interacts with the other person. So somebody who interacts with the other is called the player. For example, in the decision making of going for a movie by husband and wife, we can say that husband likes watching movie, wife like reading book. So but if they go together, then only they maximize their welfare, because it is actually a collective well-being. At the same time, if they do independently, none of them get the social welfare, because the very idea of husband and wife with us. So this is how normally players been defined. So the confessioner as well as that means the prisoner as well as the policeman or the sheriff. So normally the person who done the crime may be having something in their mind, as well as the person who is investigating the crime is having something else in their mind. So they want to call out from each other and get a solution. So this is, we will be dealing with the prisoner's dilemma game. So there are so many things. Again, when you are playing badminton, then you also have to think about not only the agility as well as the efficiency of the player, but also the strategy of the player. So chess game, every game is having the same rule. So there is player, and that player follows certain rules, and that rules in fact guides the very principles of what to play, how to play, etc. And then there is another set of issue which is deals under the definition which we need to be careful, which is the feasible strategy. So what is the best strategy, or what is the strategy which is there? What are the different strategies there? Out of that, which one is feasible for me to adopt? So which actions are open to the players, and which gives the optimal. So these are the kind of concerns normally players has in the game. Then we have also problem with the information, right? So information is a very crucial thing, because if I want to play some move, or if I want to move a move in the chess, I should know what does my opponent thinks. So it's also a mind game in that sense. So what each player know when making their decision. So whether it is independent, whether it is cooperative, etc. So in the first example which I said, in the family, that is the husband and wife want to go for a movie or reading book, it's actually called a collective payoff. So there comes the idea of payoff. Now what is a payoff? What the outcome will be of each of the possible combination of action, and how much you gain out of it. These are actually things comes under the payoff. So these are the simplest things which somebody has to keep in mind before starting a social interaction game or strategic interaction game or whatever. There are different games which we are going to deal with. Suppose if you have 2%, say Arun and they want to do some business, then they have to decide who is having money, who is having strategy, etc. Suppose if one person is having money, the other doesn't have money, but the other is having idea. The first one who has money may not be having idea. So these are the things which is normally makes people to come together and trust each other and then do business. In that also they may be having different kind of they may be having different sort of interest is going to be playing, and that based on that normally people go for their strategy or optimal strategy, etc. So this is what is actually normally deals under the theme. So this is what about the games, and let us talk about now what is the different possible strategy. Suppose if you follow, because as per the reference which was given to you all is the Economics for Changing World by Core Team, chapter 4 and 5. So this is largely covers in the fourth. Today's lecture is largely dealing with the fourth chapter of the Economics for Changing World by Core Team. Okay, so in that if you look into, then you can have two players like Bala and Anil. Alright, Bala can cultivate rice or Bala can cultivate cassava. Alright, cassava is nothing but marichini or chini or whatever. Alright. Many people have different name. Okay, so Bala can either cultivate rice or cassava. Same, Anil is also having a piece of land. He also has a possibility of cultivating cassava or rice. Now maybe in the land's gradability, based on that maybe one land is better and the other. If we introduce that, then definitely the probability of getting more output in one thing is for better for one person than the other. So in that context, it is maybe going to have a problem. But instead of that, what we are going to do is actually we will be tweaking. So some land is good for cassava and some land is good for rice. All right. So the land which is good for cassava may not be feasible for cultivating rice. Maybe it is nearby plots. So maybe Anil is having a land which both can be cultivated. That is either he can cultivate rice or cassava or both. Same the case with Bala also. So, but if Bala's land is more watery, then Bala can actually go for more towards cultivating rice than cassava, because rice need more water. And if Anil is having less water supply, then he can have cassava, and in both the way productivity of specialization would be greater, because this is what is Adam Smith talked about in his classical work of the division of labor. So that is, if you concentrate on one thing, then you can produce more given the breedability of land and all constant, and then that would be actually increases the output. So this gives a very simple interaction between the two people. That is, either you go for a rice cultivation or you do both. Okay, so you have all possibility. Now, if both person cultivate rice, then supply of rice increases, then the supply of cassava would be minimal. At the same time, if one goes for cassava and the other goes for rice, then you may be having a balanced production. And the other possibility is actually both of them goes for cassava. Then again the same problem arises, that is, your production of cassava will increase, that is, supply will increase. So supply of cassava increases means then the price will fall. So the output and the relative gain of this interaction may be lesser, just like both goes for the rice. So these are called different strategies which normally people can adopt. So that gives different payoff. Okay, rice gives a lower payoff than one goes for cassava and the other goes for rice. Similarly, the cassava is also gives actually a very a lesser output, productive output, or in terms of utility you will get lesser, because both will be having this thing. And if you introduce the gradability inside the thing, again this will be affecting the entire produce as well as the value of produce which we create during this interaction. So in the game, all these things are very, very important, and that has been discussed. So this creates a kind of question, that is, if you have one short game or you have only one time interaction, then there is a question that a player observes what other do before deciding how to act. Player also decides. So we will be coming to this questioning issue later. So before that, let me come to the issue of an equilibrium in invisible hand game. So equilibrium is the next set of argument which is normally people try to introduce. That is, in the case which we referred, Anil and Bala's production, Anil produces something or both, or one of the thing, that is either rice or combination of rice and cassava or cassava. Same is actually the strategy of Bala also. So Bala and Anil has this strategies, which is, these are called the different possibility which they are left with. Now, game theory describes social interaction. In that sense, it may also provide prediction about what will happen. So, to predict the outcome of game, we need another concept, that is the best response. So, this is a strategy that will give a player the highest payoff. Given the strategy, the other players select. So, in the case which we discussed earlier, the payoff of Anil and Bala in the invisible hand game using a standard format called payoff matrix. That is, a matrix is just any rectangular array of numbers. The first number in each box is the reward received by the row player, whose name begins with A, as a reminder that his payoff is first. So the second number is the column player, okay, column player's payoff. Think about best response in this game. Suppose you are Anil and you consider the hypothetical case in which Bala has chosen to brew rice. Which response yield you the higher payoff? You would grow cassava. In the case you Anil would get a payoff of 4, but you would get a payoff only 1 if you do rice instead. So this is about the gradability of the land. So once Anil's land is actually good for, that is less watery as I said, then if Anil go for cassava plantation or planting or cultivation, then Anil would have actually get a higher output than Anil goes for rice, because rice relatively need more water, but the Anil's property may not be having that much of water. If that is the case, then Anil may not actually get so much output when he go for rice production. Instead, if he go for cassava production, the output would be greater in that sense. That is why the number 4 is being introduced in the case of cassava production. Then Anil gets 4, where if he goes for rice, then he gets only 1, because his land is relatively less watery. So, but vice versa is the case with the Bala. So, suppose if we control all this thing, then Bala has a watery land, that means it is suitable for rice production. Then if Bala goes for rice cultivation, concentrate on rice, then Bala may get a 4. Then he go for cassava, he may not be getting that. So think about best response in this game. Suppose you are Anil and you consider the hypothetical case of in which Bala has chosen to grow rice. Which response yield you higher payoff? This is a question normally anybody asks. So you would grow cassava. In the case you Anil would get a payoff of 4, but you would get a payoff only 1 if you grew rice instead. So this is a kind of payoff which normally. So if both of you know that whose land is having more water, etc. and all, if you don't have a problem, then definitely both of you would be independently and take a decision which is suitable for your land. So if you suppose if you need more rice, a situation arises like this. You need rice, but Bala is not going to give you rice. In that context, you may be actually going for a rice cultivation, which will give you a lesser productivity, or the cultivation's output would be very less in that context. So these are the situation which normally everybody encounters in the real world. But keep all this thing aside and we see, suppose there is no problem between these two guys, then naturally if Bala goes for rice cultivation, then you go for it. Then the output would be maximum. So in that sense, though it is an independent decision, but your decision is a cooperative kind of decision. So this is a very different one. I'll come to this point later. because we need to discuss a lot more about this thing. Okay, so I need not to actually go to this details right now. Suppose if Bala decides go for rice, then Bala gets 3, and if you go for rice also, then you get 1, then the collective payoff is 4, right? Why? Because of your production also, so the supply increases, so the price flashes, then the output would be, then the price, the output would be lesser. So therefore the total output maybe is 4, but now that is being shared by these two guys, that is Bala and Nana, right? Therefore 1 and 3. Then if you go for cassava, that is you may not be actually you may be good at cassava, but the other guy is also going to produce cassava. Then what happens? Then both of you will be ending up in a situation where if Bala goes for cassava, then his land is not that good for cassava, but still he produces cassava and you are going for rice. So because of there is nobody who produces rice, you may get a higher price for your rice. At the same time, cassava, he is not that productive in production of cassava, therefore, but still slightly he get a price. So both gets maybe 2 as their output. At the same time, if Bala goes for rice and you go for cassava, what happens? So you will maximize your output and your price. At the same time, Bala to do that. So in that case, 4 will be the output if you go for different. And the last one, both of you go for cassava cultivation, then the reversal may be the case. That is just like the rice. Now you are the guy who is actually producing more cassava, you get more output. At the same time, Bala is also produces, so supply is increases, therefore the output. So the price of the commodity. So this is a kind of understanding normally we put in the game, and we can actually have different simulation and different thing, and normally different people have different solutions relating to this thing. So with the role player, I will ask what would be his best response to the player Bala decisions to play rice, and in the second one, Bala chooses rice and his best response to choose cassava, that gives him 4 rather than 1. Then place a dot in the bottom left and sell, and I don't sell this row player best response. So the best response is in that sense is so relatively best response in the other thing is also. So you have all this kind of thing. For more detail, the best strategy is actually going for 2 different crops. So this is why I said at the beginning that the Adam Smith's division of labor is very, very important to understand this particular concept. That is specialization, division of labor, and specialization gives larger output. In the game, we have established that both had a higher output if they specialize, that is 4 provided that there is no problem. All right, and we believe that there is no problem. So if that is the case, then this is the best strategy. Okay, so this is point number 1. So this is a strategy where you have different result, and this pair strategy is called that 4-4 is what is called the dominant strategy or equilibrium. Again, in this case, if it is given and everybody knows each other, that you know your best response, etc., then what you do your best is actually your land is good for cassava, the other land is good for rice, then both of you independently cultivate, then that is the best strategy, which is called a dominant strategy in this scheme. So the equilibrium is a self-perpetuating situation. Something of interest does not change. In this case, Anil choose cassava and Bala choose rice is an equilibrium, because neither of them would want to change their decision after seeing what the other players choose. So if we find that both player in a two-player game have dominant strategy, the game has dominant strategy equilibrium. So as you will see later, this does not always happen. But when it does, we predict that these are the strategies that will be played. So because of both Anil and Bala have a dominant strategy, their choice of the crop is not affected by what they expect the other person to do. This is similar to the model you may be studied earlier also. So, in the dominant strategy equilibrium, Anil and Bala have specialized in producing the good for which their land is better suited, simply pursuing their self-interest, choosing the strategy for which they got the highest payoff resulted in an outcome that was the best of four possible outcomes for each player. The strategy that yielded the largest total payoff for the two farmers combined. So in this example, the dominant strategy equilibrium is the outcome that each would have chosen if they had a way of coordinating their decision. Although they independently pursue their self-interest, they were guided as by an invisible hand to an outcome that was in both of their best interests. So therefore it is called the invisible hand equilibrium. So real economic problems are never this simple, but the basic logic is the same. The pursuit of self-interest without regard for others is sometimes considered to be morally bad, but the study of economics has identified cases in which it can lead to outcomes that are socially desirable. There are other cases, however, in which the pursuit of the self-interest leads to results that are not in the self-interest of any other player. So the prisoner's dilemma game, which we discuss later, next is going to be discussing this thing. Okay, so let me stop the session, and I'll come to the next lecture about the prisoner's dilemma after a break. So thank you for listening this lecture. Thank you so much. So enjoy your quarantine days. Thank you.